There's those certain callers that I've had a few that they've just got my blood boiling, and I'm like fired up. My hands are shaking.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fit for Duty podcast, episode number 10 with Taylor Lopes and Gilbert Rios. We have another special guest with us today. She's been a dispatcher for over 20 years. Been through obviously a lot of incidents. Me and Taylor are happy to have her on only because we kind of get that insight of a dispatcher, and pretty much because they are the first ones to get the call. And I could only imagine, as myself, I always thought about it, it's just like, imagine getting such a bad call, or even one of the deputies, officers, firemen, whoever is on the other end of the incident, and hearing about it first, but then not really having that closure at the end. If you know, in her podcast before, we always talk about our why. We talk about how to handle closure. And these are people who sometimes they don't always get that closure with the call. They don't get to see, they kind of have a picture in their mind of what the scene or the call is like, or what the person who's screaming for help or wants help. But then they won't really have that closure. So without further ado, Elsa, glad to have you on the show, and I appreciate you wanting to be able to talk with us, me and Taylor, today. How's it going?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
No, we appreciate it. So I kind of want to go into just like exactly what we were saying, is just pretty much like what made you want to become a dispatcher, and kind of like what it's like to be a dispatcher.
Well, I guess it started when I was pretty young. I used to watch, I don't know if you guys were even born then, but the 911 show with William Shatner. I think it was like in the early or late 80s, maybe early 90s.
If I know me and Taylor, we don't ever watch cop shows or nothing like that.
But I've heard about that one though.
Yeah, I mean, I was young. When I used to watch TV. And I always just found myself really intrigued with the calls, which I know some of the stuff was, reenacted or whatever, but I'd always get the goosebumps and the chills just listening to the calls that they were taking and how they were responding. But I never really thought that I would ever become one. I just was always intrigued by it, I guess. And so after I graduated from high school, I started working at Sears, the old Sears store, like downtown.
Nice.
And they hired me for a credit solicitor, which was the worst job for me to possibly get into, because I'm not the type of person, I don't like to force things onto people, push it. But it was a foot in the door. So I did that. I was working there for about 4 years. And then I went to lunch with a friend of mine who worked at the sheriff's office. She still works there. She left and came back. And she told me that they were hiring. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Why not? So I put the application in. It was like a 4-month process. Then they called me. I remember I was home by myself and I hung up the phone and I just screamed. I was just, because I got the job. And I actually tested, I think it was number 6 out of, I don't remember how many tested, but I was number 6. So they still had to do backgrounds and all that stuff. So I didn't think I was going to get the job, not because of backgrounds, just because I was, number 6 on the list. So then, yes, I started working April of 2000. So I'm coming up on 22 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've always liked helping people. I guess my why for being a dispatcher, I'm also a adrenaline junkie. I like to multitask. I can't just sit down and do the laundry. I'm doing the laundry and, watching TV, which I don't really watch a whole lot of TV, not regular TV, but I'll watch Netflix or movies or whatever. I don't have time for commercials. But and I just always had that, I guess, that want to help people, just to feel like I had a purpose. I used to live in the Bay Area, and I remember I had to place a 911 call, and I was so nervous making that call. And I remember it was around Halloween time, because when I was in school, there was this message that went around that there was going to be a group of guys in a truck trying to steal kids that were trick-or-treating or whatever. Well, we thought it was all like a prank. Well, this truck actually pulled up to our next door neighbors, and I ran inside the house calling 911, making the call. I was so nervous. But even now, even though I've worked where I've worked at for so long, even when I had to place those 911 calls, I still find myself getting nervous, which I don't understand why I would get nervous. If, it's not like when I'm calling another agency, it's just like if I'm in the road or driving down the road and something pops up and I have to call, I don't know, it makes me nervous, and I don't really know why.
But that's interesting. I mean, I'm the same way. Like, even if like a cop's behind me, or I'm getting pulled over and I got to like deal with cops. Like I've been like that forever.
Yes.
I know for me though, like it almost became part of my why. Like, so for you, because I know you guys get, thousands and thousands of just nonsense calls or BS calls, or, you know what I mean? Like just calls of people complaining or whatever it is. And it's getting a little ahead of ourselves, but it's kind of where you're at. So you going through that, or like what do you do, or how do you remind yourself of like, hey, I was super nervous on this when I had to call 911? Does that kind of motivate you to be patient with people, I guess? Lack of a better term.
I see what
like,
you're
to make you, you know what I mean? To make you like,
because I've, because I've been there,
you don't
so
treat
like
people
I know what they're going through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so like English was my second language, and growing up, I've always had to translate for my parents. And they always just assumed that we spoke Spanish, which I speak Spanish now, but my main language is Portuguese. So I would get really irritated when people would call for my parents and they would ask to speak to an adult. And I said, well, they don't speak English. And they would, oh, well, we speak Spanish. I'm like, they don't speak Spanish. And I guess bringing that into the call center, I feel like I'm able to help those people, that don't speak English. And we do have a language translator, but honestly, they're not always the best.
Yeah.
And it takes time to, tell them what we want them to ask the person that's calling in, and then for them to relay it back to us and all that. And they don't always understand our lingo either, the translators. So I just feel like being able to speak those two languages, because we do have both of those languages in our community, just kind of maybe puts them a little bit at ease when they're calling in. There's people who will call in and they'll be trying to speak Spanish. I'm like, no, you don't speak Spanish, you speak Portuguese. And so I'll ask them, and then their whole demeanor just kind of changes. And so I just think it helps the community too, if you're able to, like, where they're coming from and their struggles. And there's kids that will call in for their parents. And I remember being in positions where I had no idea like what they were talking about for, like businesses or financial stuff. And so I try to take the kids out of the situation. So I let them know, hey, I speak Spanish, let me talk to your parents, just to kind of get them out, because some of them, you can tell they're so young and they probably shouldn't be having to experience that at such a young age.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. I mean, and that's why we wanted to have you on, especially just because that is that's interesting to hear. Like you're saying, I'm just trying to eliminate that kid so the kid doesn't have to translate to the parents and essentially absorb that trauma or whatever it is that's going on and use as a frustration. But no, it's so funny to hear people's stories, because I swear something is just kind of like destiny between your languages and having to translate for your parents. And, like, that's really interesting to kind of hear about, like, oh, I had to call 911. And, because like even part of mine was like one time I just saw cops treat people like shit. Even though I didn't like cops, I was like, I'm gonna be a cop. You know what I mean? Like it just makes no sense at all. But like you're like, yeah, I'm super nervous to call 911. Never done it before, but like I'm gonna be a dispatcher. Like it just kind of shows. It sounds crazy to some people, but like there's so much destiny like in our jobs. Like we're just kind of created to do certain things. So it's interesting to hear.
Oh yeah, I feel weird just calling other people's dispatchers.
Oh yeah.
Like if I'm in a different town, I have like my phone now. I stare at it. I'm like, all right, how do I say? Because I'm used to calling mine, and I'm just like, hey, it's it's Idaho 450, whatever, and I have no problem. But then when I call, like I'm in another town about to do surveillance, like that, I pull out my phone, I stare at the number for a long time, like, how do I say this right? Like, am I gonna sound stupid? All right, and then I call them, and they answer how they answer it. I'm just like, oh, yeah, this is a Detective Rios, over here doing this. I feel so weird.
Yeah.
So I feel I never calling 911. I think once a while ago, and even for me, it still feels like even that moment. I remember I stared at it for a while, like thinking about if I should even call or not, because it just felt weird.
Yeah.
So.
And do you try not to sound like a cop when you call, like another agency?
Yeah, I try to just be like, I don't want to sound like that. Well, I don't ever try to be like that anyways, but I just try to make it as when they're talking to me, I don't make it as difficult for them. I just want to be like relaxed and just feel like, because then they start asking me a bunch of weird questions too in their town. I don't really know this town. Obviously, I'm just here just to do this real quick, and then they're so like very formal and aggressive. Sometimes I'm just like, goodness, lady, I'm just freaking. Just wanted this help right here because mine are so nice, they're just like, oh, but they probably because they know me. I don't know. But then everyone else is just super formal. And me and Taylor talked about that at work. Like, I like where we work because the whole cop thing. I said like I didn't want to be a cop when I met Thomas. And one thing about that, like he told me like, hey, you're gonna like working here, was because I didn't have to be formal. So even when I did stops, it was like, hey, what's up? Pulled you up. I used to. I mean, how time I was even say my name? I just say, hey, what's up? How's it going? Pulled you over because third brake lights out, whatever. And they just like the way I approached and the way I talked like that. They were just like at ease from the start, like 90% of them,
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I like the whole informality of having to work like that, rather than I see some cops, they have like the same routine, like, good afternoon, this is Officer so-and-so with blah, 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 blah. And then they go into like the same routine. I'm just like, oh, hey, what's up? How's it going? I'm like smiling, and they're just like, oh, cool. I like that, So.
Yeah. And I think like listening to you guys, because we always go there, but like listening to you guys talk, like, and that's why we wanted to have Elsa on. Like, we always say, like, we do a thankless job. Like, honestly, dispatching is probably the most thankless job out there because people just don't hear about it. They don't understand the complexity or like everything that goes on. But for me, like, for one, obviously working for a while, I've worked for other agencies, and then running on the task force to where you run different radio channels from like all over the place. Like, I don't know. I always depended on dispatch. And so, and that was the biggest reason I wanted to be on, is to have people have like a general understanding of, and I've seen it firsthand from intercepting the call or like them getting a call and dispatching, asking the right questions, and then working with your own dispatch is so different because, for me, like I had to try, I knew, and I'll say it, like I knew when there was I would always look to see who was working or like who was working primary log channel every single night. Anytime we logged on patrol, I just kind of knew our shift. But on a task force, I would log on or I would call in or I would have dispatchers. I had dispatchers in there that I would text on personal numbers, be like, who's working law tonight? And it would dictate what channel we used. I always wanted to use our channel because I felt like, that was just what I was comfortable with. And dispatchers in there knew me. Like if it was a shit show, like I just knew things were getting taken care of. Like I didn't really have to do too much. But I can say now, like I would call in if certain people were dispatching law, like we would not either do our mission if we could, or we would use another channel. I swear, like
that's funny.
It really is. Like, I am not kidding. I would call another dispatcher who was in there that I knew was working a different station and I needed certain things done because like it is a make or break. And like, I used to tell people all the time, like, I remember one time I got into a pursuit and there's two guys running. I chased one guy. I was calling from help from Lemoore. And I just kept repeating myself on the radio, like, where are they at? I need them here, right? And then afterwards, I was talking to dispatcher, and I'm like, they're like, you're always on the radio. And I was like, yeah, because you guys, and I say guys, but like you ladies, or, you people, you guys are sending somebody to save my life. If you fuck up in there, like, don't dispatch it, or not on top of it, or not listening, like, that's the difference between me living or dying. The only connection I have is a dispatcher in my ear. Like, the only, like, I would say shit on the radio, and everybody knows it, just constantly, just to hear dispatch talk in my ear. Like, that's it. Because without their comfort, like, if they lost their minds, like in shootings I was in, and they never did, actually, thank God. But you know what I mean? Then that's going to set everybody off. Like, I don't truly think people understand the dynamics, especially citizens, from a 911 call come in or whatever the scenario is. If you have a weak dispatch, everything's going to be fucked up. I mean, absolutely everything. And there's nothing you can do in the field to control that.
Right.
You just can't. Like, it is extremely unvalued. And I feel like with social media now, it's gotten a little bit better, just because, I don't know, I have my opinions on, like, management of the people just haven't done a good enough job just kind of showing, like, this is our true first line. Like, people always talk about, like, first line of defense and all this bullshit, and for these special heroes, right? Dispatch is truly your first line. Like, that is it. Like, if they don't ask the right questions or give you the right info, like, you could pull up to a call and just take a bullet in the head. I've had dispatchers write notes in there or call me and essentially be like, hey, this is what they're saying, but something's not right. Or they'll get on and be like, hey, they'll dispatch me and they'll be like, hey, read the notes. Or, hey, can you call the dispatch before you guys go to 97? And I'm like, sure. And they'll call, they'll be like, hey, something's just not right. Something's not right with this guy. And that is huge, right? Because then to me, I'm like, that's a game changer. I don't ask really questions. They just tell me why. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because I trust what they're doing. So I think it's really important that we have you on and kind of get into that, because I don't know, like, I relied on you guys more than, I mean, honestly, just about anything in my career. And if it wasn't for people who could keep up and understood what was going on or understood what it needed to happen, because a lot of watch commanders and stuff like that too, they'd be like, hey, dispatch, can you do this? Can you do this? I would just be like, hey, we're in pursuit, fucking do what you need to do. Notify other agencies, do all this. I knew it was being taken care of when I worked on certain shifts. And
yeah,
you know what I mean? That's just important. So I appreciate you guys. I just want you to know that.
Well, thank you. I do remember one incident where you had logged on and we hadn't heard from you all night. And you went to Nate. I was working law, and everybody in the room was like, oh shit, it's about to go down. And I swear I said this quick little prayer just to myself. And no sooner was I done, you had called out shots fired. And we're like, or no, I'm sorry, it was one at gunpoint. I was like, what the heck? Like, it just out of nowhere. And I want to say you came in later on that night and explained what had happened. And so that gave us, a visual of how quickly things changed.
Yeah, I do remember that now that you say that.
And there was another incident. I was out on the res, and I believe Lemoore PD was helping you. And there was shots fired. And immediately I get the goosebumps, and, we make sure you guys are code 4, and we didn't get an answer from you right away. And of course, blood pressure, I'm sure, probably went up. And so calmly try to ask, for another code 4, which then eventually came back, and you were plain text, you said you guys were fine. You guys were not shot, requested EMS, which I think we already had them started. But I didn't realize until recently, I go hunting with my husband. We've only been married 2 years. I had never touched a gun until like 2016. And so he's taken me hog hunting. And I recently had shot a pig like in the head, but I had been hiking a little bit. And like most dispatchers, I was not in the best of shape. But I remember going up this, it wasn't too big of a hill, but I went up this hill and I was trying to hold my breath, trying to, make sure I got this, because this hog was, I swear, it felt like it was miles and miles away. I was like, there's no way I'm going to hit it. There's no way I'm going to hit it. So my husband came up behind me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he just has a way of calming me anyways. And I got it. I shot the pig, I think, in the ear. We still haven't finished doing all that stuff with the head to find out exactly where I hit it. But I remember I had to sit down after I shot it, and it kind of just felt like everything was just quiet around me. Like I didn't hear anything. And I thought I was going to pass out, which I had shot a pig prior to this before. But for some reason, this one was different. I'm not sure why, but it got me thinking that when you guys would get involved or still do get involved in incidences, that, you know, your body has a way of like protecting itself. And so maybe that's why we usually have to ask you guys, you know, more than once if you're code 4 when you've just been involved in an incident like that.
No, that's a really good point. It really like gets my head thinking, because I know exactly the incident that you were talking about. And honestly, like your code 4 check is what like snapped me back to reality.
Mm-hmm.
So like your code 4 check of like that kind of snapped me back into reality. And like you say that, like, because your mind is in a certain place, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've listened to that audio a lot. Channel 30 actually put it out.
Yes, they did. And
yeah.
I was so upset because I'm like, why am I on the radio, or why am I
I
on
know.
TV? You know, because it was my voice going over that.
Oh, I remember listening to it. We should put it on a blurb on here. Next, we're going to learn how to do that. But like, yeah, and I think that is like brings up really good points for me of one, of why, and I've always believed that the dispatchers need to be cross-trained a little bit, or like experience, like, you know, so on FTO, you go sit in with dispatch for a while, right? To kind of understand it's chaos in there, right? Like, I think it's important that maybe like dispatchers start going to, for one, it includes them, you get to know deputies and all that type of stuff, like go to the range, or just, you know what I mean? Have those type of days so you kind of have a general understanding, and there's team building involved. But it also goes to the point of like, you are the calm in the storm. Like I was saying earlier. So even on that instance, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, we're code 4, because my brain is almost like locked or on freeze of what's going on, but there's all this other stuff that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. And you guys are making it happen. Like you're getting EMS, you're getting everything rolling and all of that. There are some dispatchers who will just freeze and just wait for you to call for that. But a simple code 4 check, yeah, is always fine. But there's such a deeper meaning behind it, because you're almost controlling the situation with your voice and your actions. Like, yes, hey, we got EMS rolling. Are you guys code 4? Yeah, we're good. Okay, you know, what do you guys need? And it just kind of like, it sets the tone. Because if you have a dispatcher, and I've been there in critical incidents where just cannot keep up, and it's just like, huh? Can you repeat that? You will just shut down and not talk on your radio anymore. I've went to my cell phone before and like start calling commanders and different stuff, or different stuff like that. I've switched channels to like, hey, you guys talk to this person. I'm going to a different channel because I can't handle this. Like, and that is, you know, that is just how it is. And that goes both ways, deputy side and dispatcher side. But, you know, I think it's incidents like that kind of show like how crazy important your job is, and the mental stress and the mental health that you guys have to endure too during this whole time. And people would just really don't take that into consideration.
Yeah.
So also, actually, I had a question now that you brought that up. So when you're working in, let's say, an incident, like kind of like the one that you brought up with Taylor, and are like any other deputy, like on a traffic stop or just whatever, like can you explain to, like, I guess like the first responders listening, or whoever's listening at all, like kind of like that relationship of like you and the deputy, or you or the fire, whoever it is, but just like, I guess for us, like the deputy, like what are you feeling like if they're going like you're clearing the channel, like you're clearing the channel for me or someone, or they're on a traffic stop and it's kind of like quiet for a little bit, or like a family traffic stop, whatever it is, like what's going through your mind? I kind of want to get that insight from that perspective as like the dispatcher side.
Yeah. So for me personally, as soon as we're told to clear that channel, or we make that decision to clear the channel, it's like you face your computer, feet on the ground, you know, fingers on the keyboard, and it's almost kind of like a tunnel vision, because you're concentrating on that particular incident. But you still have to keep your ears open for anything else that's going on, you know, in the room, if it's something that we have to relay back, you know, to the person on the radio. for me, it's usually like, okay, this things can go bad, and we just, document everything that we hear. If it's like a pursuit, we don't do very much talking on the radio. It's more like just typing everything into the call. But then sometimes for me, it seems a little awkward because I want the unit to know that I'm listening, that I heard what they said. So that's just something we've had to work on, is they want to, try to keep us off the radio because we don't want to cover the person that's in pursuit.
Yeah.
Of the incident. I personally, I like when we get pursuits. I mean, I don't like that's putting, your guys's and the citizens in possible danger. But it just, like, if you're had a long day at work and, somebody clears a channel, there's a pursuit, it's this weird, like, instant shot of coffee. You're just awake, ready to go. And, all your senses are ready. I think most of us pretty much have, I mean, we don't like break down, when you guys are in pursuit or anything like that. But we want to make sure that we have everything ready. If we call another agency to set up strips, we want to relay that message right away. And like, if we're on the primary channel, you guys have cleared the channel, we have somebody else that's taking care of all the other units. If it's day shift, it's probation, animal control, and all that other stuff. But I don't know, I kind of like when the channel's clear just because it gives us that main focus on that one incident. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, what do you do? And it could be a double, two questions, but like during those incidents, like the instance we were talking about on the reservation and like during a pursuit, how do you control your emotions? Or like somebody calls in and is like, my baby's dying, or deputies get there and they're like, yeah, I'm working on the baby, and moms are screaming on the phone, cops are screaming on the radio, expecting you to solve the world's problems and their problems and get all the info that you can. And there's a pursuit. Like, how do you not either personalize that, or like, how do you deal with that type of emotion? And like during the call and after, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
For me, I usually know it's affected me when I get the goosebumps or the chills. Like, I don't know, just this weird thing. Just even you talking about it right now, I got the goosebumps. Kid calls are usually, like you guys have mentioned, one of the harder calls to take. I did have an incident where it was a domestic and the mom had locked herself in the vehicle and she was just crying, and it was just so, I had tears in my eyes, but I try to keep like the tears out of my voice, if that makes, if you guys understand that. But
that's exactly what I'm asking. Like, how do you do that? Like, I couldn't do it. There's no way in hell.
I don't know. I don't know how I do it. There's been times where I have had tears in my eyes during some of the harder calls, but usually it's like on the way home when we've had time to decompress. My commute home used to be 6 minutes. Now it's about 50 minutes. So I had that longer drive. Sometimes it's just no radio at all. And other times it's radio blasting, until I get home. Some dispatch centers have a quiet room, and I know that our manager's working on trying to get one of those put in. Some people don't see, the purpose of it, but because there's only 3 of us on at shift at most times, sometimes 4, and you can't just get up and say, hey, I had a bad day, I'm going home. You're on to that next call. But yeah, I don't know.
I think that's kind of what I was shooting at, is to kind of get you to like share kind of that raw emotion, like you're saying, like the goosebumps, and how just talking about it gets you to feel. Because I think even like, I don't know, maybe it's looking into it, but even like dispatchers, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of you guys, and some pretty good conversations, and like talking to you, it's almost like you're realizing how much emotion that you really deal with, because like, and that's it, because your brain is the same as ours. It's like, it doesn't matter whether you're physically on scene, you're dealing with the same trauma and the same emotion as everybody else. But it's almost like, in my opinion, you guys are expected to just like deal with it. It's kind of an untalked about mental health, or, like you said, you just go from call to call. Like,
Yeah.
you may hear one of us get hurt and go to the hospital, or a kid die, and then your phone is ringing. Like, there's no, like you said, there's no like, hey, that was a fucked up call, I need a break. Like, that can't happen. It just doesn't happen. And I think it's so important, because I guarantee you, if you talk to a lot of dispatchers, even they probably don't realize how much stuff there is to unpack, the emotions and anger and hurt and lack of closure and all of that's kind of really there. So it was interesting to kind of hear you work through that.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, or we eat, I guess.
Yeah.
That seems to be a common, just stuff our faces. And we have pretty good supervisors. They'll ask us, like, they know that you've been in a bad call, and they'll ask, hey, are you okay? And, some will say, I need to get up. And if, depending, on what's going on, we can get up for a few, go outside for a little bit, try to get your composure back. I do know one dispatcher several years ago, way before we had commanders over us. She had gotten written up because she lost it over a dog call. And I didn't know she had gotten written up for it. But she ended up telling me years later. And I was just in awe. I was like, what? What do you, like, how do they even write you up for that? But I guess because she couldn't keep it. I mean, she was just bawling because, I don't know, she lost it. She has love for animals like most of us do. And, so I was blown away that she actually had been written up for something like that.
Yeah, that's crazy, because I mean, okay, maybe I'm sure it was the dogs. I would lose it over a dog call, but like, you guys are also this, balled up emotions that literally don't get to talk about it, don't get to express it, and all of that, and like something just sets you off. Like, that's kind of crazy to hear. Like, it goes back to the whole like stigma thing overall in general, for first responders and everything else. Like, that is kind of scary to hear.
Over the years, it's gotten better. I would say, they're now starting like a peer counseling, or I guess they already had like a peer counseling group, but we're like, well, we're not going to that agency to get peer counseling from them, type of thing. So we kind of do like our own peer counseling, just talking to each other. We're in there for 12 hours at a time. We spend, more time with our coworkers than we do with our family at home, it seems like.
No, I agree.
But yeah, I don't know. We'll talk about it if we need to. I know before in the past, like, we would go to Denny's, after work, just to have some time away from work, but even still be with your coworkers, type of thing. I don't know if that was just.
Yeah, on calls like you, like that you're kind of describing, do you find yourself wanting to know more? Like, maybe it's, like a shooting or leg bill or a baby case, like, and you're hearing like the mom saying, hey, my baby's not breathing, or, this person is shot and they're laying on the floor. And you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. For me, myself, I want to know everything. And like, I'll, you can't trust everything you read in the media, which I've come to learn this. And like, there's things that I can't comprehend, like, why would somebody do this type of thing? Mm-hmm. And I try to understand. I'm never going to understand it. But like, just people's actions just really just blows me away.
Do you think
but I always, I like to know the details. Like, I don't know, I guess maybe for the closure part of it, how things led up.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Do you think there's something that agencies, and it's not saying any agencies not doing it wrong, it's probably one of those untalked about things, and maybe not everyone would want to experience it. Do you think it would be beneficial for, on certain calls, if a dispatcher requested to, almost have like, not a brief, but, or like a debrief, on a critical incident?
Yeah, on major incidences, they've been better at inviting us for the debriefs. There was just a recent one with a Polaris or an ATV accident. And I wasn't working that day, but the commander did come in and asked if any of us were working when that incident happened. And none of us were on duty. And because they were looking to invite those that were in dispatch to attend the debrief. I don't know if they went or not, but I thought that was kind of cool that they, had asked if the dispatchers wanted to attend that.
Yeah, I don't know why you guys wouldn't attend that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, one, you may learn from it, like say we make a mistake or there's a lack of communication or something like that, but it also gives you that closure. It gives you that part of the team atmosphere. I definitely think that needs to happen. And I think even like on minimal things, like if it's a baby call or, just something like a dispatcher should be able to go to their supervisor, their commander and be like, hey, this call the other day just kind of was weird. Didn't sit with me. Like, and it doesn't have to be some formal thing like a deputy. I tried to make it a point to call in on a non-recorded line or, you know what I mean? Talk to some people on the side, like, hey, this is what happened with this call. And they're like, oh, okay. It's like as simple as that of like allowing you guys to like, hey, this is what happened. Because say for me, I always looked at it as like, maybe you get a 911 call. Like I remember a baby death case a long time ago. And then I don't even remember who the dispatcher was, but they asked a lot of really good questions that ultimately led to a homicide conviction from the mom, because the mom had called in 911. Oh, my baby died, and the dispatcher, God, I can't believe I can't remember, but asked really good questions.
Was it the one where she had given the baby a shower or a bath or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So then like, there's a lot of good questions, because that is just a dispatcher. Maybe it's a mom's sixth sense. I don't know. Like this shit's not right. Right.
Yeah.
It was almost like it was like a homicide on a 911 call. Don't get me wrong. Everything was ambulance and all this stuff was good and everything was taken care of. But I think that
but the call didn't make sense.
Yes, the call didn't make sense, but the dispatcher's questions like ultimately solved that case and it never went to trial. So I'm sure the dispatcher doesn't even know that, but that is what made or break the case. Like that was what we were like, wait a minute, this is like, you listen to the 911 call and it was literally like an interview. It was all necessary questions to be asking, but that dispatcher was like, and I've heard a few of them like, okay, something's not right. And just like, boom. Well, how about this? Well, was the baby breathing? Did you find it here? Was the other babies here? Who else was in the house? Like I remember listening. I picked up the case later on as detectives for several reasons, and I remember listening to the 911 call and I was like, holy shit, like it's all here. Like, like literally the 911 call has a full homicide confession without actually confessing. But if you just listen to the line of questioning, it's like, okay, and it was really important info. If the deputies who responded to the original scene would have read all the notes and stuff like that, they would have done something different. But that is huge. So if you guys are brought into that, then you understand like, okay, like that was good. You know what I mean? Or like what I did was right. And then it makes you want to do it again. And then you're also like, hey, this is what ended up happening in this case. Like this baby died and the mom did this, and the mom did A, B, C, and D. So you're like, oh shit. Like, I don't know. That just makes sense in my brain at least.
Yeah. They usually say we only hear when we've done bad,
Exactly.
But like I said, things have gotten a little better. It just depends on who's working, who's on patrol and who's listening and all that. But yeah, that, we're taught to ask, certain types of questions, and there's some of us that will ask more questions, and it depends on what's going on in the center too.
Yeah.
But like, I know there was, excuse me, I know there was a call. I was working night shift. This lady called. It was like after midnight, like maybe around 2 a.m. And she had called because she wanted to know if there was any job postings. And like, I looked at the clock. I mean, I knew it was late. I looked at the clock and I'm like, So I got her address and I didn't hear any commotion in the background or anything. Got her address. They went out and it was a 273.5. They ended up arresting the guy. It's like, you just get this feeling like something's not right.
Yeah, and that is like, that is so cool, right? Like, that's the things that like people don't understand how important dispatchers are. And I think there's a lot of dispatchers themselves who don't realize how important it is for them to do a good job. And like, they get into that everyday grind. No one appreciates us. We're just in this building. And I totally understand why a lot of them feel that way. But then like you hear a story like that and you're like, holy shit. Like, and I've been on calls like that. We're like, hey, this just doesn't seem right. And like, I got those side phone calls and it literally ended up saving our lives
Mm-hmm.
several times. You know, it's that those are the stories like I like to hear, and I think more people need to hear. I know.
Yeah, I mean,
Gilbert,
and we're not always right about, you know, when something doesn't sound
no,
right,
but
you know. Sometimes, you know, we put all this effort into getting all this information. Deputies go out there and like declare information or Ida or, you know, Nora or something. And we're like, what? All of that for that? You know, it's like, no, there's something else going on out there. I just know it.
yeah,
But
and there, and honestly, there probably is. There probably
yeah.
was.
So those kind of get like, what? How was I wrong? You know, but
I'm actually glad that you guys, I was listening to you guys talking, and me being like, you know, being the younger deputy of like 6 years, like listening, and I finally had this feeling that I'm happy to have you on also, because I had this feeling like how to explain this. So how Taylor said in the beginning, like you guys are just like going through the same things as us emotionally, because you brought up the whole like way back when like the whole pursuit thing of like you get that adrenaline rush, and then you're explaining these different stories to Taylor of these emotions that you're explaining as well as the same thing I would be feeling. Like you're literally feeling and doing the same exact thing as we would out there on the street. So you're literally going through that same emotion and mental, like I can't imagine like how hard it is on the mind and whatnot. And it's just like you guys need, like how you guys brought up the, you know, those little quiet rooms and whatnot. Like man, it's just crazy to, I mean, I always respected dispatch, but I definitely see it on a whole nother level that I could finally understand through your interview. And I'm glad that we get to have this, because now we could show other deputies, or young and old, you know, like, hey, like this is from out of my, because like who's actually sitting down with like a dispatcher, you know, and actually having these conversations, unless you know them or friends with them, you know, and actually get like, this is how I feel, this is what I'm going through, and this is what we go through. And it's like, oh shit, because I'm just sitting here listening to you and Taylor, I'm just like damn, because that's like if I'm sitting down at the table with Roger or something, right, and a pursuit goes on, like I'm getting that adrenaline rush and that hit, and I'm like running out the door, and boom, the same thing as you, you're putting your feet down and you get that hit, and you're the same thing. And then, or if you're having a conversation with ladies screaming on the phone, you're feeling those emotions. If I'm talking with some lady screaming in person, I'm feeling those emotions, like her husband died or my child was just taken, something like that. I'm having that same feeling, like, all right, like hold it together, you know, because you have to be the help for them. And so it's just, yeah, like there's definitely should be a lot of more things in place for dispatchers to be able to talk and to be able to have those moments of like taking like that little break, because like you said, like you're just like us, you're going call to call. Same thing with like how Taylor talked about, like you could be in a fight, use of force one incident, next year you're going to go help someone. The next call you're going to get, you might go to a traffic stop. Next call you get, you're going to be doing just like something like nothing really going on. Next call you get, next thing you know, you're in a pursuit or your partner's in a pursuit, and it's just like the whole day was just a whole bunch of emotions and adrenaline up and down. And the same thing with the dispatcher. Like you can go into somebody screaming that she needs help. You go into you maybe get some asshole who's calling dispatcher being an asshole. I've heard calls like that before, where they're being an asshole to you. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you have everyone's irritated because you guys all in this room. So now, you know, I don't know what goes on in dispatch, but I bet you guys get irritated with each other sometimes, just like how cops get irritated with each other. And then next thing you know, one call is about a baby death. Next thing you know, one call is just about one of the deputies getting the use of force or pursuit. Like it just a whole, and then at the end of the day, now your day is over and you're going home. Like, how do you even take all that? Same thing like us, like we being talk about how we do it. What's like, you know, how do we have closure at the end of the day? And to do all that, we talked, you know, several times about how to do that for everyone else. But so what would you say as a dispatcher, like how would you explain closure at the end of the day, going through stuff like you have a day like that, a very active day where it's just these different things all together? Like what
a roller coaster of emotions?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know that I've done a very healthy way of doing that. So usually when I work night shift, I'm usually able to come home and go to bed. I know, like with my husband, he's also in law enforcement for a different agency. You know, he stays up for a while, and I don't know, I guess I just turn off my brain or try to turn off my brain and start all over again. I don't know. I'm not a drinker, so I don't do that. I'm into crafts, but I'm not going to do that 5 or 6 in the morning when I get home. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
You do
everybody's
what the
got a
rest of
different
us do.
lifestyle.
We just shut it off and move on to the next thing. Like, it's funny to
Yeah.
hear it because that is essentially what we do. We could talk about all this healthy shit and all these tools, but you were doing it like the rest of us. You're like, I don't know. I go home and go to sleep. You know what I mean? Like I go home and I do a couple things and like I go to bed because I mean I couldn't imagine just the stuff you guys like take in. So if you think about it, Gilbert, like as a cop, right, you deal with the stuff that's in your beat, maybe some of the stuff outside of the beat, and that's it, right? There's some stuff that we don't ever hear. Like they're dealing with the fireside, like EMS, they take a lot of calls that just doesn't get dispatched on the primary line. Like so it's nonstop from fire to EMS to somebody just having some stupid ass complaint. Like if you truly take into consideration like the amount of volume that they have to deal with and multitask. I mean, they're dealing with trauma that we never even hear because it's on the fireside.
Yeah, they say for us not to take anything personal, which I'd say a majority of the time I don't. But like you said, there's those certain callers that I've had a few that they've just got my blood boiling and I'm just, I'm like fired up. My hands are shaking. And I don't know. I don't know if I was having a bad day and they just really triggered it, or it was just them themselves, that one call that just like set me off. I mean, obviously I didn't go off on them on, on the phone because all lines are recorded, but I remember getting off the phone and I'm literally shaking. Like I'm showing my supervisor, like, look at my hands, and I'm just shaking. But I mean, that doesn't happen every day. I don't know.
Then you're right back to the whole like, all right, well, headset on, like I'm gonna sit here and take the next call. Like you have no time to calm down, like no time to deal with it. It's like,
I do remember a fire call where one of the deputies was involved in a traffic accident, and she had been, I think she may have started off as an explorer, if I'm not mistaken. And she was out in Stratford and there was a motorcycle involved and I had to dispatch fire. So when you were talking about emotions, I knew of her, but I didn't like know her, like, personally. I remember giving out that fire call. I don't know if the guys on the other side of the radio could hear, but I had tears. And I don't know if she was okay, but I don't know. I didn't have any control over my emotions. Like I just was teary-eyed. I was toned out, station 10, traffic accident. I don't remember what I said. I just remember I know I had tears. I wasn't like bawling on the radio. They could understand what I said, but sometimes you can control them. Sometimes they just, come
no, I mean, it's crazy. Like what we're saying, like that's why I love having these conversations because like it's kind of raw for you too because you've never really like talked and just let out your emotion. And then because I guarantee if we do like 2 more podcasts with you, it would get like deeper and deeper and deeper. But so one of my worst fears, because I'm from here and I know everybody, every call I would go to, like I would look at the like traffic accidents. I would get there and I would look at the car if I could tell what they were because I'm like, and I would be like, oh, don't know anybody who drives that. Don't know anybody who drives that. I've been to calls where I put a license plate in the call and I've had dispatcher call me like, hey, call me. And I'm like, okay. Like, and you just knew like, oh shit, I've had dispatcher's family in traffic accidents and traffic stops and stuff like that. And like, honestly, until this day, I mean, I guess I did think about it, but I really didn't think about it because you guys are dealing with that like all the time, traffic accidents and stuff like that. And, it's just another thing that Gilbert's talking about of like emotions and trauma that you guys have to deal with. And I guarantee you a lot of you don't even truly realize it until you just kind of get that breaking point and have a bad day and cry or let it out or, just, I don't know. It's kind of crazy to hear though, really, if you think about it.
I usually try to get vehicle descriptions, especially if I know it's somebody or I don't have a lot of family here in the area anyways, but my mom lives in another county. but she drives into the county where I work. So if I, you try to get the vehicle descriptions in that area. And then of course she never answers her phone. And I do try to call her to make sure she's okay. But yeah, I don't know. It's, I enjoy doing my job. I've been asked that, they ask me how long I've been doing it. I'm like, oh, do you enjoy it? I'm like, well, I've been in it for so long. But I guess I'm just the type of person, I like to connect the dots and do the research, for things. That's why whenever the detectives would call in and say, hey, do this or look for this, like I'm on it, like, and I'll get help from my coworkers too.
I figured that out real quick, that dispatchers love to do that. And I would be like, oh, hey, this is what I got. Let me know what you find. And you guys would send me like emails, screenshots. Like, I was like, they blow like most analysts, like physical or like analysts away, like that do like DOJ and stuff like that. And, and I think that's another thing, like people don't truly understand like how much you guys are able to do and process, because that's what you deal with on a regular basis. So you're finding old calls and old stops and old license plates and internet information or like addresses, phone numbers. I mean,
we've gotten better programs now where we can access that stuff a little easier than before. I know back in the day I was using like Spokio. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that, but that's how I was finding my preliminary information for you guys. But we got some better stuff now. So
and that's your guys' like expert field. So for me, like I would just call and be like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Like, hey, we're going to be out here doing this. And you guys would call and be like, hey, just so you know, we were out there in like 2002 and this guy was here and this guy has this warrant. His mom was here and his dad was here. Yeah. I would be like, I'd be like, can you email that to me? And literally, I mean, we solved multiple cases based on like dispatcher info, or we were able to find people. Like some people would be so secretive, like especially in task force, right? I don't want to tell anybody, not me. I'd call in and be like, we're sitting on this house. We're looking for this guy. We're hoping he drives this car. And next thing you know, like, depending on who was working, I would get all of this info from old stops. Like Hanford had info, different stuff like that. Because like Gilbert was saying earlier, like he didn't like calling other dispatches. And I didn't either. And I had to work with every dispatch in the county. So I would usually sweet talk our dispatcher. I'd be like, I'd give a little white lie, like, hey, I'm so busy right now, but do you mind calling like LA dispatch or Fresno dispatch and ask them if they have any info on this? Because I would call and I wouldn't get nothing, like nothing at all. The dispatch would be like, oh, okay, you're an idiot. Our dispatch would call and I don't know, they would call back with like history on everybody's baby's mama and the cars they drove and license plates and all kinds of stuff. Or like if you would ask me on the radio, hey, we have the number for Fresno dispatch, you want us to call, or you want to call? And I'd be like, oh, can you call? Or no bullshit. I'd be like, can you have them call me? Because just the fact that a dispatcher called another dispatch center as like, hey, can you call like the sergeant? They would call me and tell me whatever I wanted. If I didn't go through our dispatch and they said or did whatever they did, and I just called them directly, you would never get the same response ever. It's just,
because then they have to call the agency that you claim to be a part of and get the
So I would
make sure you're a real deputy. And
I think it's just important, like to have that working relationship. Like I think a lot of agencies are doing better at that, and including dispatch more and realizing. And I think they always have. It just goes back to everyone knows how important dispatch is, because if you have a bad dispatcher, you'll know instantly, or the dispatch center goes down or whatever happens, instantly. People just don't express it, if that makes sense. Everyone's always appreciated dispatch and they know the value in it, and that's why, in my opinion, like people would always get frustrated with dispatch. Like, hey, do you have this yet? Do you have this yet? Because without dispatch, you are not going to function. That's just reality of it. Like,
some don't believe that, but some of the older generation.
They don't believe it. I remember being watch commander and like, you will never ever disrespect dispatch. I had one old guy that I had to supervise. He's not here anymore, and he was the worst at disrespecting dispatch. Dude, I had to call him in. I was like, that shit will not happen on my shift. Like, you can't even talk right on the radio to dispatch, yet you want them to process 1,000 things and give you a return within like 30 seconds. But I don't know. I've always had that connection with dispatch, and it's just, I don't know really what it was. And I don't know. It's a pretty deep meaning to me. And like you guys saved my ass more times than I could even think of, like for various different reasons, literally saving my life by telling me certain things or directing me certain ways. I was lost one time and like way out on the other side of Stratford. I had no idea where I was at or anything like that. And somehow, like, you guys were able to be like, hey, this is where you're at. And I was like, what the hell? Like, it was like a body dump. I mean, there's multiple calls, like in pursuits. I would call out like information, there's crazy shit, and you guys would know exactly where I'm at. And that's why, and like, so you said earlier too, like some people wanted silence in pursuits. I couldn't. I hated it. And that's how I knew I had a super emotional connection to dispatch, because I just needed you guys to be like 10-4, you know, like southbound 41. And like, because if there was silence, I would panic. I would talk on the radio all the time because I had to hear you guys talking because I knew you guys were in control. I was not in control, but I knew you guys were like able to control. And if something needed to get done or someone needed to be notified, I just trusted that you guys did it. And I think that is so important, like for people to truly realize like who's making it happen, you know, behind the scenes. And it's you guys. So I think it's pretty awesome.
So on the premise of that, like the fact that I kind of want to ask you also with, because me and Taylor have always appreciated dispatch. I used to love telling dispatch like Merry Christmas when I used to work Christmas like that, or Thanksgiving. And like before I go off 10-7, I'd be like, oh, County 450, like Merry Christmas. And I remember the first time I did, I was nervous. I was like, can I do this? You know, I was like, I'm just going to do it anyways. And I think you guys appreciate stuff like that. And I used to come visit dispatch a lot when I was before I went to detectives. I used to come visit dispatch at least like once a week. Like whenever I was go at Hudson Martin, we always go together. He always taught me like, hey, we go visit dispatch. You know, we sit and talk with them, and I got to go and know everyone by name and stuff, and just go visit for a little bit and whatnot. And we do the whole Christmas exchange thing. So I like that camaraderie. But so I guess to like people listening, like what would you say, like, because I'm kind of happy this interview highlights, like how you guys are like really similar to us, but what would you say to like any like new deputy or first responder, like to I guess more understand like your job and like don't push things. I the whole disrespectful part of it, like like how Taylor's talking about the whole this guy wants this and this. Like I guess what would you explain to him to like understand like the job more and like we like these things that you guys do, but don't do this.
Yeah. So for sure, it's obvious, like communicate. I just think the communication really needs to be there. I also think like how you said, how you would come in when you guys talk on the radio and we've met you, it helps us put your face to that voice. And for me, I've just noticed, I don't want to say so much like treated differently, but I know who I'm talking to. It's just not like a robot on the other end of the radio type of thing.
Yeah.
So like there was these two deputies that I could not get their numbers straight for the life of me. They were newer ones, could not remember which one was which. Well, they both happened to come in, and ever since then, I have their voice to that number, to that face. Like I know who I'm talking to. Tone, the tone of your voice is also a huge, well, to me anyways, I should say, it's a huge thing because you can say one thing one way and somebody else can say it a different way with, attitude. And maybe they don't have attitude. That's just how they talk.
Yeah.
So I think, that makes a difference. We like it when you guys catch the bad guys. We like to celebrate. So, you guys call out at 10:15. We have a really quick, like 1 second celebration before that key up and 10-4. Like how you said, you'd key up and say Merry Christmas. We're like, aw, and then, key up really quick and either say Merry Christmas back or 10-4, or whatever it is. Because it's like you guys are going out of your way to, just send us that quick message. We're working the holidays just like you are.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I know when I first started, but the person that was in charge over our center, it seemed like she did not want any type of like contact between the dispatchers and the deputies. I guess for reasons way prior to when I was there. But I really do think it helps build that work relationship. So we know what you guys want from us, and you guys can understand what, we're going through when things are busy in the center.
No, for
and
sure.
that just
No, that answer is perfect. I like it because I think everyone should always go, and if they allow it, for sure, like go visit their dispatcher, because I got to see, how the headset works. And when I'd be talking with you guys, I would see someone get a call. It's like, and it wasn't like they're like, we'll be talking, and all of a sudden a call go on, they just look at the screen and they just do their job, and you got to see like the multitasking of it, because you guys will hold a conversation with me and all of a sudden go to the screen, type, listen, talk, and go right back to conversation with me. Like, how the hell they do that?
Yeah. It's the whole multitasking. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I mean,
go ahead, Rios.
No, I was gonna say, like, I think that's good enough advice right there. Like, just be respectful. Like, we always talk about that. Just be respectful. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter as a deputy or if you're just talking to your beat partner, or you're talking to the dispatcher. Like, so overall, just be respectful to everyone.
Yeah, I think that's just really important. We don't have to go out, for lunch or breakfast or whatever, go shopping or, do extracurricular stuff. But I just feel like we're working together, then we should have that working relationship. I had a caller that called in the other day, and she wanted to know the name of the deputies that had responded to her incident. And it wasn't during my shift. So I had to do some research, found it. Only one unit was attached to that call. And so I gave her the deputy's name, and she's like, no, it was the Caucasian one. And I'm like, I don't know what these guys look like. Like, I couldn't tell you which one's Caucasian or Hispanic or,
Yeah,
because it was a newer deputy. I could assume by his last name that maybe he wasn't Caucasian. But so I went into the narrative and saw there were some notes in there about another deputy that had responded. And I happen to know that he is Caucasian because he does take the time to come into the center, and see how we're doing, or talk, give us a little debrief or whatever. So I hate when people call and try to describe you guys out there on the field, and we have no idea what you guys look like, or he's short and chubby. I'm like, yeah, I have no clue. It's just. But
do you think there can be some like changes implemented in that to kind of foster a better relationship? Not that anyone's going out of the way to have a bad relationship, but like, I don't know if that makes any sense, or like what would be like the ideal situation to where, say, deputies are at, because I've worked in different agencies, right? So I've worked in one agency, was the one I retired from. Dispatch is completely separated from, the deputies in the same building. Then I worked at another agency before, and you're all in one building. So you saw dispatch 1,000 times a night, like 100 times a night. And I did notice, somewhat of a difference. I don't know. I didn't necessarily notice anything bad, but like, do you think there could be some changes either maybe when a dispatcher starts or a deputy starts, or just in general, how you could kind of fix that in your opinion, if anything at all?
So yeah, initially when they hire new dispatcher on, they'll go like on a ride along is usually the plan. But then they don't, that's it. You just go on that one ride along and nothing else. I know several years ago, we had it to where one dispatcher would go over to briefing whenever the new shift would come on, and they would do their briefing. But then, like, for me, it just felt kind of awkward because some of the deputies didn't know why in the heck I was even there. Like, what is she doing here? I felt like I was intruding on their, their time. But I've also been on other shifts where the sergeant would bring in his whole shift into dispatch, either like beginning of the shift or towards the end, if things aren't that busy, and kind of just do like, this is what we expect, or this is what we want, this is so-and-so, like an introduction type thing, so that we know who we're working with for this shift rotation. And I think that would help just because you have that visual and you know what each other's expectations are. Because they would ask us too, like, what do you guys like or what do you guys not like? So I just think it just makes it for a smoother shift.
Well, yeah, and I
Working
think so
together.
too. If you have like, and when I say personal relationship, you know what I mean by that, but meaning
Yeah.
like professional, whatever, I don't know. Anyways, with like, it is though, like, because as I got to know you guys, and a lot of it was over the phone because I'm so ADD and 1,000 miles an hour, but like I knew exactly, I knew you guys all by voice. I could put a face to your voice. Like I knew I would turn on my radio at home if we were getting ready to leave, and I could turn it on, and I knew exactly who was working law. You know what I mean? So, but to me, it was a lot more personal. So I can call in, or like if we're talking on the radio, it sounds crazy, but it is significantly different. I've had, dispatcher. I like you guys had a new dispatcher one time. I didn't know who it was, and I just happened to get on the radio, and I remember thinking, like, who the fuck is this? Like, it almost. I mean, obviously she was there for a reason, but it was almost like someone called me that I didn't know on my phone that wanted to talk to me, and I'm like, what the fuck you calling me for? Like, that's I swear to you, that's how I felt, to the point I remember I forgot who I texted, but someone in there, and I'm like, who the hell is that? She didn't do nothing bad or anything like that, that is just, I think as first responders, that is just who we are, and like you're saying, if a deputy calls you and is like, hey, I'm, deputy 500, you're going to be like, oh yeah, okay. And you're like, can you do this for me? And you're going to be like, I don't know. We're like, say I called in, or like Gilbert called in, and you're like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And you're like, oh yeah, absolutely. Let me get it done. Like I would call all the time. Like I wouldn't even be logged on, and I would call you guys and be like, hey, can you run this person for me? Like no questions asked. Be like, oh yeah, absolutely. This is what it is. And all right, have a good night. All right, see you later. So it's like, that is so important. And that definitely, that needs to continue to happen. So.
Yeah, I know. I don't remember how far back it was, but we created like this little yearbook type thing with all the deputies' pictures in there.
Nice.
So that we could, even though we hadn't met them, but I don't remember where they got the photos from, but at least we had a face to go with that name. We didn't know what they sounded like or whatever, but we don't have that anymore. That was quite some ages ago, but I don't know. I just think it makes a difference.
No, it does. And it's just, I mean, we're all going through this shit together. Like everybody is, and it's just, we want a team atmosphere where you have to have that. Like you have to have that. I call it a personal relationship. Everyone knows what the hell I'm talking about. You have to have that, because if not, there's just like this huge disconnect, or nobody gives a shit. Like it's just kind of breed that atmosphere. Like, so I guess we kind of covered it. I only had essentially one question. If you want to even answer it, what are some major frustrations, or like from a dispatcher's point of view, just in general, like everyday stuff, like things that truly bother you for one reason or another? You don't even have to answer all that shit.
The public or from?
Just in general. I don't know. Like, yeah, more, I guess maybe, yeah, like just, I don't know. Yeah, like just frustration, whether it's underappreciated, or people don't like, know what you're doing, or just, I don't know.
Okay, so as far as the unappreciated part, I know that's always been like a huge thing for dispatchers. A couple weeks ago, I actually was going to tally every time someone said thank you, or you made my day, or something nice, like at the end of the call, or have a good day. I of course got busy on some other calls, and I lost track, and so I never did finish that day. So we do get people that do say, thank you. They're not always calling on their best day. Usually something's wrong in order for them to be calling us. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't want my picture plastered every time I do a good call.
No.
I've had sergeants that have sent or emailed like a letter of accommodation type thing. Like, oh, that was really nice. Like I wasn't expecting that. I recently had one from the PD that we dispatched for, and totally unexpected. I mean, I stayed on the call. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're taking forever to get there. Didn't realize it had been 45 minutes on this call, but ultimately it helped them, take their next actions or whatever. from the public, my coworkers know that it drives me bonkers when they give me their zip code. When I ask them for their address, it fires
No
me
shit.
up. I'm like, I don't need the zip code.
So
I don't need
funny.
it. And I always hear them like chuckling in the background. And like, you can give me the city because there's some street names that are the same, with neighboring towns. But it drives me nuts when they give me like their whole mailing address. And it's like, and I've caught myself sometimes saying, we're not going to mail you anything. I don't need to tell them that, but I'm just like, I don't need your zip code. I hate when they don't know where they're at, like their location. It really frustrates me. Or if they don't know their home address, and I'll ask them, well, how long have you lived there? Oh, 5 years. I'm like, how do you not know your address? Like, it blows my mind. Same thing with phone numbers. Oh, I don't know my number. Or don't you have my number on your screen? Because, TV shows have put it out there that we can track all that stuff, which isn't necessarily true.
Yeah.
If you call 911, then yes, it's going to give us your phone number, but it's not always going to give us your location, especially with cell phones nowadays. We have ways to track it down, but yeah, it just those are like my little pet peeves. At work.
The zip code one is funny.
The zip code that really just triggers me.
So you mean don't call about the hole in your tarp every single day?
No. See,
That's my favorite guy.
No, I have met him.
I don't know if he does still call.
Yes, he still calls. I was actually, when I was still living in town, I had gone to the grocery store nearby, and he was in there, and I was shopping. I was over by the dairy section, which across from that was the wine section. And I hear this voice. I'm just pushing my car. I have no idea who this person is that's standing there. I hear this voice, and I'm like, oh, hell no. So I go down a couple of rows, and I text one of the dispatchers that I knew was at work. I'm like, hey, is so-and-so calling in right now? She's like, yeah, why? I said, okay, he's not at home. He is at the grocery store.
This guy.
Yes.
Every time I would show up. I hate him more now.
Yeah. Him and the one from the other town about ATVs. Those two drive me up the wall.
Oh, that's so funny.
That is so funny that you recognize him by voice.
Yes.
I recognize him by number as point. Yeah, I was like, I know that number already. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then, their numbers do pop up. So we already know it's them that are calling in. But before we had that feature, it's just, you never knew who you were getting on the other line.
That's funny.
But,
well, before we get going, I just want to ask one last thing pretty much. What's one piece of advice that you would give to like a new dispatcher coming on? Like we'll talk like the whole part, either like the work side or just like the like understanding like the emotional stuff, like kind of like prepping them like, hey, like we're not just like handling calls and there's more to it. Obviously, we've just been talking about it. It's like what advice that you would give to them?
I guess like what they've always said is, don't take it personal. There's just so much that goes on in there that you just have to pay attention, and don't be so hard on yourself when something does go wrong, when you have no control over it. Like traffic accidents, deaths. We have this thing in dispatch, which I don't know if you guys have out there on patrol, but it usually comes in threes, is what we always say. And so we start off with one and we're like, oh, when's the next one? When's the next one? Like you just know it's bound to happen. But deaths do definitely put a damper in the room. Like you can just feel like this air is just sucked out of the room, even though we don't know who the people are. Or if we have like a CPR call in progress and, later they're asking for a corner at the hospital, we find out it's from that residence, and it's just like, bummer, they didn't make it. And we don't give CPR instructions. EMS does that, but we just, I don't know, things are going to happen regardless, and we can just do our best that we can to get the services out there that we need to and get the accurate information out. There's just so much. But we are hiring.
Really good.
No,
See?
what was that?
Yeah.
No, I was saying that's good. It's like hiring, but that was really good info too, because I mean, it's really good, like advice and, it's basic, but like, that's the things that people need to hear. It's not like sugar coated with a bunch of bullshit. It's telling you of how to survive a 22-year career, like in dispatch and dealing with the emotions and everything that comes with it. Like she said, they are hired.
You still have to live your life outside of work. And if you start to feel anxiety or depression, try to reach out and get some help. I know several years ago, I was suffering from some pretty major anxiety. I didn't realize it, but just from a bunch of traffic accidents. And whenever I would go out, I was always picturing car accidents happening or trying to remember where other car accidents had happened when I was working. So I did have to medicate myself for a little bit, but I was able to get off of all that. But just, if you need the help, just there's help out there. And those people are obviously there to help you out. So, don't be afraid to seek it.
For sure. Well, I appreciate having you on. Also, thanks for taking the time out of your day to be able to give us that and be able to showcase and highlight how similar your job is to ours. And I hope people hearing this will be able to understand your profession a lot more and just, be nice, and you'll be nice. You're the ones talking to us, so you get the same kind of attitude back. If you want to be mean, you're going to get an attitude back. You will just be nice to whoever you're talking with and be patient, and just hopefully this understands. Hopefully this helps with everyone who was listening. But Taylor, you have anything else for Elsa before she leaves?
No, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everything you've done for over the years, and I think that end part was really I think the whole thing was really good, and the end kind of sums it up too, of the emotional things that you have to deal with, to the point that the mental health part of it even bothers you with anxiety, and you're willing to face it and willing to talk about it, and even going out and you're thinking about traffic accidents, and your mind is on traffic accidents. And so I think it's important for dispatchers, just like anybody else. You guys are first responders, just with everybody else. We all go through the same thing. We need to have a general understanding and, get that help. And it's okay to talk about them. And I learned a lot about and I always kind of knew it was there, but just hearing, the emotion and the trauma, the mental trauma that you guys have to go through, same as everybody else. We all just got to get on the same page and deal with it. So I appreciate you having the courage to come on and kind of talk about that and putting it out there. And that's what it's all about. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
No, thank you for your long service. Hope you all have a good night and be safe.